Oh, you hold. Oh, okay. You just turn it on and off.
And I guess we had to lock up, yeah, which we didn't have to do before. Yeah, we'll go. Do you remember like the word? Yes. Oh, you did? Oh, you put it on the table and it helps? Okay. I'm gonna wipe down this part because we don't wipe down.
Yeah, we have extra of those sanitary wipes at the office. Maybe we can just bring a whole one in.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. You're here for Zab? Your neighbor, advocate?
Yes,
Which one?
listen,
Are you a neighbor or?
neighbors,
Excellent. If you want to speak, you're willing to fill out a name.
I don't want to speak to them.
Okay, if you change your mind, fill out a name card.
Thank you very much.
And then have each one of us. This is our first meeting, in these chambers, so we're here early, you're reorganizing, figuring things out. So, are you in position? And we'll decide it? Okay, good. Do you have a perusal binder?
Oh. What I didn't find.
I guess just one little thing from back there is there's a 2-minute delay. We shouldn't start to. Otherwise, we won't be on.
Okay. There's a 2-minute delay?
There's somehow 2-minute delay.
City of Berkeley Zoning Adjustments Board, January 10th, 2019. I hope none of you are listening to our president's lies.
Do you want this one? Do you want it again? Oh,
Oh my God,
no,
I'm not
there's
gonna
more
do
on the
this.
table. Yeah.
Just basically just what's the.
So the general rule is no in this one. Good rule for us to follow as much as we can.
Okay. What's the rule?
Tenants, no food in here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So do you want to have her call it? Yeah. Gonna have,
And there's only bathrooms over there, right? There aren't bathrooms back there.
There's
Oh, yeah, there's the one.
one
Private
small
one.
non-ADA bathroom.
Okay.
It's a secret.
Yeah.
Rick is gonna make an announcement about the local hazard mitigation plan, and I don't know what that's.
Jim, what we like to do, we made those signs. We put one right outside the gate on the
Oh, the please
sidewalk.
don't litter?
Yeah, and we put one in the courtyard right
Okay.
outside these doors, just to keep the noise down, and if the
Okay.
chair wouldn't mind making a
Hey,
little
Tom.
announcement
How are you?
about
Good, how you doing?
noise
All right.
in the courtyard.
Happy New Year.
Keep neighbors and the neighbors respectful of the neighbors. That's what's
How are you?
I'm good, how's it going?
No, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We're implementing it, but we met down there. Yeah. This is my first meeting here.
Never know how nice it is.
You get to see your.
You'll never know how nice this is compared to this is like.
It doesn't look like more high tech. Yeah, the screens up there. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the TV room where they control the TV. It's basically either live broadcast or podcast. Generally high-end broadcast for us. Yeah, and the other thing, other setup stuff, Linda, make sure that we have all this stuff, but, card, pens, there's a perusal binder, agendas, Linda makes sure that we have all this stuff. I always check it beforehand. Like one time just to throw all that stuff out. See, there's only so many things to do.
When it's off,
You just check the agenda, it looks like everyone.
so that's your job. I don't know why.
How we do it back,
That's the same, but it doesn't have.
and we'll be sitting up here.
Or maybe you want us to.
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, there's no reason for us to, I mean, Ben will sit there, but there's no reason for us to sit here. Are you staying for the whole thing? Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, I'm only gonna sit for a little bit. Let me show you the back, just so you can see where things are in the back. said for the, for everything else.
Hey, the water's not brown.
Well, you know, sure, we can figure
I
something,
got used to it.
we can figure something out for you, John. There should be Wi-Fi.
This is BUSD device.
Well, Jim, in the instructions, there's information on.
Is there?
Alex, I'm Shannon.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And this is Allison.
Hey,
She's
Alex.
our-
Nice to meet you.
Oh, yeah, so, I mean, did they get approval or?
Yes.
It did come through, okay.
It was a lot of,
And, yeah, we
Yep.
come for 3 months and
yes, but we were all there till, yeah, the clerk was, I leave at 5, if it comes in at the next minute, and it came in at the next minute, and
Good.
at 5:01, she's like, this, you will get an official email, but no, this is, he's good.
Okay, so I think we should put your name out then. Oh, it's Les, or did we, since you were part of it?
Yeah, she'll be here.
When you say me, you mean you and Jim.
Jen, yeah.
Because it
Jen
wasn't,
wasn't,
Who else is?
I think, yeah.
I
it
don't know
was
what's on the agenda, but usually, even if you're an item, if you're the project planner and it's on consent, unless the secretary says you don't move it, because in the beginning, they could pull it off the consent calendar and move it, because if somebody comes and complains, it'll automatically just pull, and unless there's like no way, no how it's
Is your house
ever
full?
taken off consent,
Yeah.
then they
we
almost
do
always
have
come.
central heat, we have one heater in the kitchen, which
Yeah.
really keeps the kitchen nice.
Yeah, yeah, it's like, and then we could just turn on the stove, you wouldn't need it.
It's like,
So I guess you'd be trained so you could kind of sub in for if somebody is sick or something maybe?
she.
Yeah, the O just said I should. Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's what Shannon and Greg really work on as the secretary. They're the ones that decide. There's a kind of a production calendar that we have. It's an Excel list that they put their projects on. And 2 weeks before, or whatever it is, when they need to decide what's
Yeah.
going to go, they start talking to planners. Is it like going to go? How many? How long is it going to be? Just that calculation. That's what Shannon and Greg do. And Shannon does the second meeting. if you look at the agenda, it tells you who's appointed by whom. So Igor's the chair, Denise is the vice chair, so they always sit in the same place. And everybody else just moves around.
So Jim, if you don't mind standing outside and
Anybody can go in?
helping direct people in and.
Yeah.
Yes, we pop them open.
Hello, members of the public. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Of course, are you applicants or neighbors or?
I came to watch you do
Okay. Yes.
but I've also worked in residence.
Alrighty. You know, you can watch it. You can watch it from home.
I know, but it thought it'd be fun to see it here in person so I see actual people.
Alright. If at some point, if you're back from another meeting, you fill out a name speaker card if you want to speak.
Thank you
And
very
it's-
much.
so this is our first meeting here and.
Oh, really? It's your first meeting here? Because you normally do them at the old city hall, which is what the old
Right,
city hall
yes.
is, and this is now almost.
City clerk shows.
Yes, so this is, so part of my speech is,
Yeah.
and then I hope the chair will say that as our first meeting here, we think we have it under control. We might not have it all the way under control, so be patient, but it's also a really lab this evening. Oh,
Here,
he
we're
brings
doing
him.
San Pablo.
Okay, that's what brings
You're
him.
doing the restaurant?
I'm Greg tonight. He's,
Oh, you're Greg?
he's out sick. So,
At least somebody knows what they're doing here. Oh, look at Alex over there. Is Alex being a substitute?
he is. He's a sub for Teresa Clark.
Yeah. Isn't he supposed to wear a tie?
We're pretty easy.
Okay.
The architect, does he need to wear a tie? Do you own a tie?
I do own a tie.
All right. Part of my spiel this evening is it's our first night in this in
I love
these
this room.
quarters.
It's so great.
So hopefully everything works. But if
Everybody's going to be much better behavior.
but be patient with us if things go wonky. You'll be patient with us anyway.
Alex, is that your nice bike?
That's my bike.
That's a beautiful bike. Wow. I remember seeing you with that bike. You showed up with that. Hope you have
Just to make sure you guys kick off.
That's easy.
Oh, yeah.
Alex is for Teresa. Denise?
The first year it was ninth grade.
Not sure about
Okay.
There she is.
Oh, there she is. Okay. Welcome to the first meeting of the zoning board in the new year and in the BUSD boardroom. Thanks so much for your patience. Like some others, it took us a little while to find ourselves a new place and get situated. Just so you know, the bathrooms are in the back. There is a request that there be no food in the boardroom, please. And when leaving, please keep noise to a minimum to respect our neighbors. With that, staff, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Board Member Khan?
Here?
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'd like to say it's,
And ask for ex partes.
yes, any ex parte.
No export.
Great. Board Member Kim?
Here, no ex parte.
Board Member O'Keefe?
Here, no ex parte. This on? Push the,
There's a button.
that one.
Oh, I don't have to hold it down. Good. Yeah, I'm here in no ex parte.
There you go.
Board Member Olson?
Here, no ex parte.
Board Member Solosky?
Present, no ex parte.
Present, no ex parte.
Oh, I wasn't looking up your name, though. Board Member Sharenko?
Here, and I actually have two ex parte communications to report, and they are documented in paper. Do I need to disclose them here?
Yes, please.
Yes. So one was at a community meeting with the development group of 2198 when they first proposed this project in May of 2018, I believe. I live somewhat close to the neighborhood, to the proposed project site, and so attended. And the other one was a follow-up to that meeting, one-on-one with a member of Realtex, the development team, asking some follow-up questions to that meeting.
Great, thank you. And Vice Chair Pinkston?
I'm here. No, present.
No ex parte.
Thank you. And Chair Trago?
Present, no ex parte. We have a quorum. So, is there anyone who wishes to move any items? Actually, before I do that, I did not receive any speaker cards staff is going to let me know if there are any speaker cards on. Yes. So it appears that we do not have any speaker cards in opposition to 2040 San Pablo Avenue. If there were, we would need to move this off the agenda. Actually, in the audience, can I get a show of hands if there is anyone wishing to speak to a project other than 2198 or provide off-calendar comments? Okay, seeing none. We're ready to move to a vote. Kerry?
I'd like to propose that we vote on the consent calendar as proposed by staff.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank
And
you.
that includes the minutes from December 13th.
That includes the minutes from December. Thank you. Staff, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Board Member Khan?
Yes.
Board Member Kim?
Yes.
Board Member O'Keefe?
Yes.
Board Member Olson?
Yes.
Board Member Solosky?
Yes.
Sorry. Board Member Sharenko?
Yes.
Vice Chair Pinkston?
Yes.
And Chair Trago?
Yes. 2040 San Pablo Avenue, you have your use permit. Congratulations. It is appealable to the City Council if there's anyone who wishes to appeal it. Thank you.
Chair, do we need to see if anybody wants to speak on non-agendized items.
Yeah, I
We
did
missed that.
ask for a show of hands earlier, but I will ask again, is there anyone wishing to speak on anything other than 2198 San Pablo? Okay, seeing none. We're now going to move to 2198 San Pablo. The way this is going to be structured is we're going to hear from staff, then we're going to hear from the applicant, and then we will hear from members of the public wishing to speak. If you're a member of the public who wishes to speak on this item, please come to the front and see staff about a speaker card, and we will call on you after. This is a project preview, and so no action will be taken tonight. The purpose of this preview is for us to ask questions and provide any advisory comments if we wish. So with that, once everyone gets a copy of the renderings, we will hear from staff. Thank you.
All right, good evening, board. Tonight before you is a preview for use permit 2198. I'm Leslie Mendez, the city project planner. I'm actually going to turn you over to Julian Bobolov of Urban Planning Partners, who is the contract planner on this and is taking the lead. And then the presentation will follow by the applicant's team, which is David Trachtenberg. So, Julian.
Good evening, board members. My name is Julian Bobolov. As Leslie said, I am a contract planner working with the city. Before you today is a project preview for 2198 San Pablo, a project at the intersection of San Pablo Avenue and Alston Way in the CW district. The project would demolish an existing single-story commercial building, the current use of which is a liquor store. The building is not a historic structure, and the demolition has been referred to the Landmarks Preservation Board, who voted to take no action on the demolition. The project would have 6 stories, would be 67 feet and 9 inches tall, and would have 56 dwelling units, as well as 3 live-work units on the ground floor. The project would provide 20 parking spaces in 3-level stackers, as well as 44 indoor bike parking spaces inside of a bicycle room, as well as a bike repair facility. In addition, the project is utilizing the state density bonus law. Per the city's methodology, the base project, when taking into account the height restrictions, setbacks, and all other development standards, was calculated at 41 units. The project sponsor is choosing to provide 5 of those units as reserved for very low-income households. This is slightly above 11%. The 11% inclusion of affordable units qualifies the project for the maximum density bonus at 35%. This would be 35% of 41 would be 15 additional dwelling units. So 41 plus 15 density bonus units would be a total project of 56 units. To accommodate the additional density bonus units, the project is requesting 2 waivers modifications. One to exceed the maximum height in the CW district of 50 feet and 4 stories, and the other to exceed the maximum floor area ratio of 3.0, and to propose a floor area ratio of 3.93. The project has also been designed to include setbacks from the residential properties to the west. The property immediately to the west of the project is a 2-story multi-unit apartment building, and then the properties further west of that are single-story, single-family residences. Now, the required side setback to the property line for a project abutting a residential district is 5 feet. So the project would be set back from the residences 5 feet 8 inches at the ground floor. above the ground floor, the setbacks would be greater. As you can see here at the north elevation, so on the northwest portion of the project site, or adjacent to the rear of the neighboring properties, the project would actually be set back 42 feet above the ground floor on floors 2 through 6. And the top of the ground floor where it's set back would essentially function as a patio for the residents of the project, as you can see in this slide. Then the portion adjacent to the front of the neighboring properties, or the southwest portion of the building, would be set back 10 feet at floors 2 through 4. But then at the 5th floor, as you can see, the setback steps back to 28 feet. And then on floor 6, it steps back to 51 feet and 8 inches. The project is requesting to provide 20 parking spaces, which is less than required by, The Berkeley zoning ordinance requires 1 space per dwelling unit and 1 space per live-work unit for a total of 59. However, since the project is a density bonus project and meets all the required criteria in the density bonus law, state law limits that a jurisdiction can require no more than half a parking space per bedroom. In this instance, since the project would have 61 bedrooms, the city cannot require more than 31 parking spaces. Again, the project is providing 20 parking spaces. So that is my presentation. Staff requests that the board provide advisory comments on the massing and design of the project, the proposed live-work units, and the parking reduction, and any other items of note. Thank you very much, and I will turn it over to the applicant.
Actually, before we do that, are there any questions for staff? John?
Thank you. I see the resident just actually walked in, so maybe we can clarify this with the resident themselves. There's a letter from a resident that gives the address as 1039 Alston Way, and when I was looking at the shadow studies and the maps and everything, I couldn't find 1039 on the schematics. I'm kind of assuming it's the upper floor of 1035 or something along those lines. Does anybody have an answer to that? You do.
It's a 0.4C.
Huh? Where are we?
In the renderings.
A 0.4C.
4C. 1035 Alston, right?
Yeah, but the address of the letter was written from 1039, and I don't see that address anywhere.
If I may, I believe we heard from an audience member that you are correct, that it is that you should assume for the hearing this evening that it's
one of the units in 1035.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I kind of surmised.
And again, as a preview, when there are questions like this, we can give an answer. We can say, you know what, we'll confirm that at the next hearing. But thank you for raising it.
I just wanted to see where it was. Yeah. Right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I have a question for staff in terms of the bedroom count. If you do the calculation, it comes down to 61 bedrooms if you don't include the live-work units. So does the zoning code, please help refresh my memory, it doesn't account for live-work in calculating the number of bedrooms?
Not density bonus ordinance, because the density bonus ordinance is for dwelling units and the live-work is commercial space. So the live-work would fall either under the commercial calculation for parking, and or certain districts do have a specific parking ratio for live-work.
Does this district have a ratio? I didn't see it included in the calculation.
The ratio is 1 per live-work unit.
Live-work.
Okay.
And that's listed in the permitted requirement table.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, let's hear from the applicant, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. I'm David Trachtenberg, architect, along with my colleagues here. Thank you, Leslie and Julian, for an excellent presentation. Is our presentation queued up? Okay, if you could please. Oh, I don't know. Leslie told me I should come over here. I can come to the podium if you prefer.
That would be my preference, as
Okay.
you're a member of the applicant team and not a representation of staff. I think that's a better delineation. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to flip through this very quickly. I got 5 minutes, and you guys did a great job covering this so far. So I think much of this stuff we're going to just flip through. The site is well served by transit. There's the context. There's the site context. Photos of the existing conditions. The site. If I can find the pointer. Is that it? No, we can't see it. Okay. Anyway, so these existing conditions. So here's the building. So the building, one of the things that we've tried to do in this building is to, it's one of these, again, one of these difficult situations where we're a large building up against the existing small-scale 1- and 2-story fabric of the R1 zone. And these are situations which all of us in this room have dealt with over the years now. And it requires a degree of sensitivity to try to make as little impact as possible. I'd say that thank you, the big move here from an architectural perspective is, is that we carved out this void in the northwest portion, quadrant of the building. And that was really there to reduce the shadow impacts and reduce the massing of the building. And utilizing the state density bonus, we were able to mass the building in such a way that minimize the impacts on residential and mask the bulk of the building along the large boulevard on San Pablo. So this illustration here, the bottom shows what's permissible under the state density bonus law, which is a plain, this is basically a plain density bonus project, which would not be a friendly project, but would be permissible, not what we'd want to do. So you can see the difference, the same number of units would be contained in this building as in our building. And we achieved that by just kind of rejiggering the massing a bit. But it does have a big effect. Let's go back here. So you can see here the section which shows by stepping the building back, we're limiting the impacts. There has been some concern, if you've read in the letters, about people looking down from these balconies onto people's backyards. One of the things that we try to do with these things is to provide a landscape buffer at the edge of the balcony such that people can't get close enough to look down. So that's in lieu of doing a tall wall, which would effectively block out the people's view. So we have a 6-story building, stackers at the ground floor, and ordinary stacked units above that. I don't think I need to go through the plans. I'll just simply say that the entrance is off of San Pablo and the automobile entrance is off of Alston, and we don't think that the traffic engineer or Caltrans would have it any other way. I don't think there's any question that we would be permitted even to have the automobile access off of the San Pablo Avenue. We have 2 residential units in the back there which have the little private gardens, and we have 3 live-work units along San Pablo. Mezzanine level, and typical levels at 2, 3, and 4 floors, with a little podium garden in the quadrant that's the void. Moving upstairs, the building starts to step back at level 5 for some open space. We're meeting all of our open space requirements. We're not asking for any reduction in that. And so we'll just flip through the visuals of the architectural qualities of the building, view from down the street, from the park, again from aerial view from the park. And I'd like to point out the feature underneath the podium there. We've got the 2 live-work units, which you can see. Oh, there's disappeared on me. Okay, shadow impacts. So here's the city requires us to provide shadow studies for June 21st and December 21st, summer and winter solstice. And so the bottom right shows 2 hours after sunrise in June, and it's maybe hard to read out in the audience, but basically the dark shadows are the shadows which are cast by existing structures, and the light shadows are the proposed things. So you can see, okay.
Since this is a design preview, I'm going to give you a little more time.
Thanks, Igor. So you can see that even a one-story building here will create a shadow that's quite long. So our building certainly does create some shadow in this time, 2 hours after sunrise. 2 hours before sunset, it's casting shadow across the intersection. Oops. December 21st, here you have bottom right, 2 hours after sunrise. We think that the shadow impacts on the park, which were quite important, are pretty minimal. And even on the house next door, the roof of that building is not in shadow, and there's really minimal impact. And that's really as a result of our massing strategy. And if you look at the 2 hours before sunset, again, there's really no shadow impacts for residents. Again, just touring around the building. So the sense of the building is that of almost like a found warehouse, a kind of recalling the kind of industrial sort of pedigree of West Berkeley. So one might imagine this might be an old warehouse which might be reconverted into dwelling units. That's the kind of aesthetic that we were seeking. Hard to see this in this light, but ground floor of cast-in-place concrete, skin on this portion of Corten steel, and integral color plaster. Can we turn those lights down a little bit? No, can't do it. Okay. Entrance of the building here, this is the main lobby, so you can kind of see some of the quality of the streetscape, so thank you. Each of these live-work units has its own individual identity and its own sign, own front door, and it's a tricky thing to get the live-work to work in a proper way, to have the correct balance between what's private and what's communal, what's public and private, and live-work lives in that sort of gray area between mercantile and residential. So we have room here for some planters at the front of the building, which prevents people from putting their nose to the glass, but also allows for a kind of welcoming mercantile experience as well. View from down the residential street, looking back up, and on San Pablo, looking back towards the west, the roof garden, the context view. And then the existing condition and proposed on San Pablo, and another existing condition from George Florence Park and proposed. And another view from at the intersection where the liquor store is, existing and proposed. And finally, from Alston Way, looking east, existing towards the liquor store there, and voila, proposed. I'd like to end with just a few comments about the contributions which this project makes to the community, which total over $2 million, and the table there shows the breakdown of that. You can read that yourselves. I'm available for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Could you show the last slide?
Oh, can you, the mic.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks. Other questions? Yeah.
So I have a question. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen the correspondence from concerned neighbors about the building height. One of the things we've done in a couple of different projects where the project has a large podium section because they're doing parking stackers. This is not the first time we've seen this. We've asked the applicant to consider lowering the podium level to allow for ground floor retail and less aggressive stackers to reduce the overall building height and have it fit in a little more to the context. Are you and your applicant open to that? Or can you talk to me about what that would mean for the building design?
Well, we have done that. We did that on 1200 San Pablo, and that's not an issue which we've had a chance to discuss with the client, and it's something that we could discuss, I think, as an option. In that case, it lowered the building 4 feet when we went from triples to doubles. And that would cost, I think, 7 parking spaces in this instance. So that's the loss of parking is another issue for the neighborhood, which they have to weigh against the height.
Okay.
But I think that's something that we can consider and discuss further.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Other questions? Okay, thank you for the presentation. And we're now going to hear from the public. And I have 4 speaker cards here. If you wish to speak and have not filled out a speaker card, you can come see staff over in the front. I'm going to call the names I have. I'm going to start with Chris Horgan, followed by Adam White, Cheryl Davila, and Robert. And you will have 2 minutes each. I think we can, since we do have a little more time.
Cool. I won't be long.
We'll make an exception. You'll have 3. Okay, we'll give everyone 3 minutes.
Appreciate the compassion.
Sure.
My name is Chris Horgan. I live at 1030 Alston Way. 1033.
Just give us a second to.
Yeah, sure. My name is Chris Horgan. I live at 1033 Alston Way. I've been there about 12 years now. I'm supportive of more housing in Berkeley, and especially West Berkeley. There's a lot of opportunity, but having lived there for 12 years, I have a lot of insight into just what goes on in that street, how traffic flows, and things like that. So I have some very specific feedback for the applicants, and all this stuff I've addressed with them over 6 months ago. We met a few times and chatted in good faith, but I think several of these items haven't been acted upon. First, the height. I won't go too much depth, but I did ask for something like a 5-foot height reduction. I was told by the applicant that the architect said it was not discernible. 7.4% of a building's height. I don't have to have a degree in statistics to understand that that is a significant reduction and an increase in my light and privacy. The ground floor is very tall. It's over, I believe it's 18 feet tall. And again, I talked to staff and they said at 1200 San Pablo, that was successfully used to reduce the height a little bit. And I'm surprised Mr. Trachtenberg not bringing that up because I raised this issue with the developer over 6 months ago. We do have parking concerns. It's a little difficult for us to have all this additional impact on our parkings without an available RPP for our neighborhood. I spoke with city staff recently, and that's not in the works. We do have traffic concerns, specifically about the entrance, on Alston Way. It's kind of funny that Caltrans supposedly wouldn't approve this or even think about it when this very thing was just approved on the same city block with the U-Haul lot. They had an existing curb cutout and driveway, and they had approval for a driveway entrance on San Pablo for 18 cars of parking. This unit has 20. Okay, so I'm not sure why that wasn't pursued more before this meeting. I think that's unfortunate. They also mentioned the bus stop as an impediment. There's currently a driveway going in right there, and it's used way more than a 20-car parking lot would be using it, and it's operating with no impediment. And then the developer's own employee said that AC Transit was going to be moving bus stops to the opposite side of intersection. So again, not a real issue there. I can't speak for the neighbors and say that we do appreciate the massing. We do appreciate the attempts to address shading and things like that. That's important. They've been very nice folks to chat with. They offered to help us with the RPP, even though that's not possible. But with that being said, I think there are some very obvious, objective changes that could be made to this building so it works better for the neighborhood, for all of us who live near this building and who have seen everything that happens. There's tons of kids that use Alston Way to cross to go to Rosa Parks Elementary School. They're not crossing other ways, they're not going down San Pablo, they're using Alston Way to cross because it's a controlled intersection. And so you put a much more active driveway, especially during school hours, on Alston Way, and I think we're going to see some very ugly things going on there. It's not going to be helpful for the students of Berkeley schools. That's pretty much what I got.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Adam?
Hi. Hello. Hi. My name is Adam White. My wife and I just recently moved into 2125 10th Street, so we're behind there. I really agree with a lot of what Chris said, and he was pretty succinct with it, so I'm really not going to say much, except the concern of the parking, I guess, and the fact that the city did not allow us, or is not considering to give us the stickers that would allow us to, use that area there. So I don't know if there's any way to, get them to actually reconsider that in terms of You know what I'm talking about, the stickers that are for residents. So I don't know what this is. Quick question is, along San Pablo there, is it zoned to have other structures that are going to be as high as that? You know, continuing on?
This is not really supposed to be a back and forth,
Oh,
but
okay.
I think in our staff report, there is information about both approved and anticipated buildings that are within 4 to 5 stories. But I'm going to ask staff a question based on your comment after you're done. So
Okay.
we'll try to
Well,
get that
that's
clarified.
pretty much it for right now. So. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. So I have 2 questions for staff, actually. One, could you speak to what is proposed currently in that area and at which heights? And the second question is on the PRP program, or the Residential Parking Permit Program. I thought that there was a council item that soon would allow neighbors below San Pablo to be able to apply for that program if they choose to do so. Could you please clarify whether that is the case?
I am not aware of the RPP referral from council. Of course, that wouldn't go to the planning department. It would go to traffic engineering or the traffic department and public works. However, I will be looking into that to have an answer for you when we next meet on this project. And I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the first question, whether there's existing development or if similar development could happen on other properties.
I think existing approved or in the pipeline development 4 stories and above.
So again, I don't have the specifics on that tonight. There is a lot of projects that are entitled and currently under construction along the San Pablo corridor. So, and I know we have a list of those that have been compiled for our GIS layer. So again,
Yeah, there's a list on page 10 of the staff report. It doesn't specifically call out, you know, which projects have which height, but it generically says that there's these existing and proposed projects that are 4 to 6 stories in height, and it gives the addresses.
Thank you.
So again, that's as specific as the information that's going to get tonight. And again, when we come back, we'll have more specific information. And if you want to email the question.
I mean, that's, if there's, if you're looking sort of, I mean, tying it back to this project in this vicinity, if possible, or if there's a general request for the San Pablo corridor, what's been entitled and what do we have an application in for, is there thinking ahead in terms of this project and potential impacts or detriment from this project, what will be meaningful information for you at the next hearing?
Yeah. I can only speak for myself, but I would like to see anything that might have potential cumulative impacts, either on traffic, an alleged parking crunch, whatever the concerns that have been brought up. I'm not as interested in seeing something, say,
Gilman,
by where I live, north of University, but anything in that vicinity.
Super, thank you.
And just for your information, the traffic study that's being prepared for the project and the parking study is also going to look at the cumulative developments, how much parking they have been approved with, and what the effect of that would be.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. I was going to raise that issue about the parking. Secondarily, I think it would be helpful for us to see where the entrances, exits on these new projects, where they're situated, and how that might impact San Pablo or the side streets or wherever they are.
Thank you. Okay, Cheryl, you're next.
Hi, so I'm here as an individual because I'm a neighbor. Live right next door on the second story. 1039 is upstairs. And all our windows are facing San Pablo, so there will be a serious detriment. My husband has rented our unit since 1979, so we've been living there with, the reason why he rented that unit was because of the sunlight. And so we will be seriously impacted by this. A business is being displaced, a building is being demolished. Also, it just seems too large and out of proportion with the rest of the block and the neighborhood. There's nothing that tall within the block and within the first, I mean, from University to Alston, actually to Bancroft, even to Dwight Way, there's nothing that high. So, and I'm just wondering, like, what the developers are going to do to block and not make a dust and debris detriment during the demolition and construction. There's going to be a serious impact on parking. Currently, there's no place to park as it is, and with the building on, you know, right there, it's going to be a problem with 56 or however many units. There's no affordable housing included. Yeah, they're going to go to the trust fund, but we really need affordable, not market rate. But yeah, 6 stories will be a detriment to my building, all the tenants, and my whole block and neighbors on 10th Street and on Alston. And, you know, there's been, I've lived there for 37 years, so that intersection at Alston and San Pablo has a lot of accidents. So often when I've done dishes in my kitchen, I'm a witness to accidents at the bus stop, at the, you know, on the corner. So I can, and as my neighbor Chris said, you know, it's very high traffic area for the students going to Rosa Parks and families actually just walking their dogs in the neighborhood. So I can't imagine like having the driveway be on Alston, how that, I mean, it's really going to impact the students, and they're all elementary students and their families. So, yeah, I'll end it at that, and thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask staff for some clarification. The project as proposed does include 5 very low income units, and if it had used a different scheme, including payment into the Housing Trust Fund, then under the city code, it would not currently qualify for the density bonus. Is that correct?
The project does include 5 units reserved for very low income households. That's correct. Could you repeat the latter part of your question?
I think that's fine. Okay. Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, I live at 1039 Alston, and yeah, it will highly impact. Like, I'm gonna lose 2 hours for the remainder of however long I live there. So that was a beautiful thing to have sun, but, you know, I guess if I wanted to live in New York or San Francisco, but that's why I chose Berkeley. And I've been there since 79, 78, and I did work for the Berkeley Unified School District, so that is a concern because we would get routed and we would go to all the bus stops and pick children up and drop them off. And so, yeah, I agree with Chris. It is highly used by children and bicycles. So if that could be worked out, that would be nice. You know what I'm saying? Because that does, I think, clearly present a danger. And there's already so many cars that there's a studio there and a karate studio. So there's a lot of people coming and going there. So if there's 60 units, and in theory they should use the bus or BART but we know people like to drive. So for whatever reason, if every 60 units times 2, let's say, it's 120 cars, right? So I don't know. So I see this gentleman shaking his head, but he probably owns a car, right? But so, maybe he owns a bike, I don't know. But anyway, so I think that will impact the neighborhood. And my other question is, I saw some of the lists of what they were going to do for the community, but I think there's been a problem, like people claim they're going to do things for the community, and then through backdoor deals or however it happens, then it doesn't happen. So I'm just concerned, is there a way to make sure that these promises are going to be kept? Thank you.
Thank you. Tim? We just got your speaker card. And if that will be the final comment, unless there's anyone else wishing to comment. If so, please come see staff.
What's the time period you're giving?
3 minutes.
2 minutes?
3.
3. Great, thank you. So I'm Tim Frank. I'm speaking on behalf of the Center for Sustainable Neighborhoods this evening about a project that I think is very interesting. So our work centers on promoting to 3 big picture values, one of which is addressing the global challenge of climate change. The second is addressing the housing crisis, and the third is addressing income inequality in California and in America. And this project has an opportunity to actually address all 3 of those things. And when you look at the climate justice issue, we know that one of the most important things you can do to actually address climate change in the Bay Area, because the largest source of our emissions is the transportation sector, that putting housing in a setting where people can actually drive relatively little is actually one of the most important strategies. And this is clearly consistent with that. And you get more benefit the more units you include in the project. So 6 stories is better than 5, 5 better than 4, et cetera. And especially when you're set on a corridor that is as wide as this, with ample bus traffic as well as proximity to BART. We have a project here that's actually quite beautiful. Doesn't surprise me. Virtually all of David's work is beautiful. I've been impressed with his work since I first saw the first building of his design in Berkeley. Because it's a density bonus project, it includes an affordable component. And not only there is an affordable component, but it comes in the form of a set of on-site units, which is actually very, very favorable. Where the question arises on the equity side is how the project will handle its labor issues. And this project hasn't yet made any commitments to actually use prevailing wage labor or to use apprentices from Berkeley schools, et cetera. But it could, and we're actually eager to see a conversation with the developer around those issues, and hope that that's something that we can bring to the table. Because if the project were to actually include something like that, then it would really be a home run and something that Berkeley could be incredibly proud of. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So at this time, actually, before we go to comments from the board, I wanted to see if any ZAB members had additional questions for staff or the applicant. Okay. Oh. In that case, what we're going to do right now, and this is generally what we've done with design previews, is we're going to go around the dais, and everyone will have an opportunity to speak. We'll put a guidance on this of no more than 5 minutes. Since we have a little more time, if you go over a little bit, that's fine. But let's start with John and go around the dais.
Thank you. Generally, I'm pleased with the design of this project. I think you have made some concessions with the step backs on the abutting neighborhood. I would like to see, as per Denise's recommendation, looking at a 2-stack parking instead of the 3-stack, and maybe drop it down 3, 4, whatever, how many feet we can drop it. Massing is, I mean, you walk down a street where there's 1, 2, maybe 3-story buildings, and then you see it will stand out. It will. And massing is aesthetically certainly not as pleasing, it's not as aesthetic. If we can drop it down, if we can work on those aspects of it, again, generally, I think you've done a really nice design here. I appreciate the design. I do want to see some exploration of the comments about where parking is going to enter and leave. If that can be looked at, and maybe you've already explored that, and maybe that's a non-starter. I know Caltrans is very difficult to deal with. So, but whatever you can do along those lines, I would appreciate it. I looked at the shadow studies, and there will be some slight impacts for some of the neighbors, particularly 2 hours after sunrise, I believe. That's where the real impact is, but by noon, it seems that there's very little or no impact. So it's very early morning, and then throughout most of the day, on these shadow studies at least, it indicates that there will not be much impact. And again, that I appreciate that. You did, it seems to me that you tried to address that, and I appreciate that. You have electrical charging, I like that. All these projects along San Pablo, I explore looking into having a zip car, space or some kind of allocation there for shared car share, because they're in use in Berkeley, and I think they're going to be more in use as people get out of their cars more and more. I'm not sure I can think of anything else right now. We've been asking, I'm not sure, Denise, are we still asking for a shuttle allocation in West Berkeley? And I'm just going to raise that because we have asked other projects to kick into a shuttle, some kind of shuttle, West Berkeley shuttle service. And there's more and more talk of kind of a citywide linking up the existing shuttle services. UC, the hospitals, some of the, they all have their own individual shuttles, but if we could link some of these up citywide, we might have a really vibrant shuttle system. And part of that is getting West Berkeley more involved. Just to consider. And and one more thing. The prevailing wage, the union labor, that type of stuff. I would like to look at that, and I would like some feedback on that from you next time you come. I appreciate it. Thank you. Overall, a nice project. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dohi?
Thank you, Igor. Yeah, I think I agree with John in that this project seems pretty important in addressing the housing crisis and the shortage that we have. But I think there are some aspects to work on, especially when, through the public comments, they mentioned shadow impacts and parking. But I think another important issue was about how the kids using the intersection, how it might become more dangerous. And I think my concern is if we try to reduce parking or reduce height, by reducing parking space, would that increase kind of the traffic there and make it more dangerous for the kids or for the neighbors around? So in terms of shadow impact, I wouldn't mind having more parking space to alleviate that, but I'm not a total expert on that, so I just wanted to put that out there. And I also had a question about the RBP and how residents could apply for that, and maybe that could also help with the parking situation. But overall, I'm in agreement with the project design, and I am looking forward to seeing how this project develops in helping building more units around this area.
Thank you. Denise?
I agree with my colleagues. I think, I think this is a 4-ish story zoning envelope. That's what the underlying zoning is. That question came up. And when you do a 6-story building in a 4-story zone, especially where that transition hasn't happened, you're going to get a lot of concern from neighbors. And as we're trying to add density to existing communities all over the East Bay, I think it's really incumbent on developers to try to fit in where you can. And I know, David, you do an excellent job of that. But I think these oversized podiums to accommodate parking spaces are part of the problem. That is, you're creating a huge concrete wall for people to look at, which is really unattractive, right next to their home, their yard, their windows. We've had this conversation before on other projects. So I think that podium has to come down. I am not in favor of an 18-foot tall podium when the only reason it's there is to provide extra parking. And Berkeley is increasingly at the zoning board, we're willing to get rid of the parking and have more bike parking. You guys, I think, only have 20 stalls of bike parking. You have 50 units. You need more bike parking unless you think they'll fit in the units, which look small. Did I read that wrong? Okay, good. So bike parking, yay. Okay, good. Scooters, I've seen them littering the sidewalk everywhere. Maybe instead of everyone parking their scooter out in the public right-of-way, you have a scooter space that's tucked into the building or nested in there somehow to use up your ground floor in a usable way. Getting rid of the live-work units means that you won't have that as rentable income, and retail in that location, as you know better than I am, is challenged. So there may be other ways to use the retail space that creates animated, exciting, pedestrian-oriented things like a bike stall room that could be visible from the exterior. Maybe there's a bike repair shop in it that isn't a huge moneymaker but animates the street. I'm not opposed to having ground floor residential. I think San Pablo makes that challenged, but Alston makes that more possible. So if that helps with the revenue loss from losing the live-work units, we're saving you money on stackers and concrete, so hopefully it nets out a little bit. I too would like to hear from, I know there's a traffic study, to hear from whoever's working on this about the traffic safety issues and the journey to school. I know there's a lot of planning now being done about what the walking travel, path of travel for kids to schools, and making those far more walkable, much more obvious, much better signage, not allowing car use or reducing driveways. And Berkeley hasn't really done that sort of planning around our public schools the way other communities have. But I'd sure hate to add a driveway for a bunch of cars in an area where little kids could be at risk. So I think you guys need to bring back some more information about that before I'm comfortable. I realize Caltrans hates driveways, as does every other city on a major public street. So I just want to think about that and think about what those traffic movements are, and maybe ways of slowing down or having a buzzer or something other than just an open driveway that cars can pull in and out of without people being aware that that's happening, especially people who don't tend to pay attention like kids. I think that the roof setbacks are a good start at pulling back the active occupied roof area from the neighbor's edge and from the Alston edge, which is really more of a residential street edge. I think more could be done. I could be reading this plan wrong. It looks like you've got a 10-foot dimension from the building edge with maybe 4 feet of landscaping that could be occupied and 6 feet that's not. If you could widen that out to, because it's not just people looking over the edge, especially when you're abutting a single-family district. It's also noise on the roof deck, and how many people are on the roof deck, and are they hanging out and drinking and talking loudly when people are trying to sleep? So to the extent, and you've put the roof deck, I think, on the bay side or with the better view side and the neighbor side, because that's where you're stepping back. I'd like any active roof area to be pushed to the commercial street edges and away from the neighbors. And I could be looking at the plans wrong. I think I see the San Pablo edge and it steps down towards Alston, on the Alston side, but you still have an active occupied roof deck essentially with sound that could be going out over the residential block behind it, which I don't think we want. So it's both a visual impact of people standing there looking down and a total occupancy of the roof deck and the potential for that to be by itself a seriously annoying adjacent land use, and it's amplified when you have 56 people living in the building and the single-family house next door is occupied by 1 or 2 families who even if they have a party, are only going to make so much noise. So I think you need to maybe make the occupied roof decks smaller, so you can't get more than 5 or 10 people out there at a time, and it's a lot more landscaping and a lot less usable area. Or if you have usable occupiable roof deck area, it's on the noisy, busy street where the ambient street noise will drown out the roof deck noise. It's not facing into the residential or, you know, that sort of mixed-use block. Those are my thoughts. Thank you. And as always, you guys do a lovely job on these building designs. You're the gold standard on design and trying to figure out how to make a density bonus unit fit. So I think this is a great start, as my colleague said, and we look forward to hearing back from you.
Thank you. It's always great to go after Denise, because then I can just say I can agree with her on so much, and it's always said much more eloquently than I ever could. I want to thank you for coming before us for this design preview. I agree with my colleagues. You are a master of trying to make an elegant design and accounting for community concerns. And I recognize that the city asks for a lot, and so we on the ZAB are going to, I'm going to join my colleagues who've spoken so far in asking you to stretch and continue to work with the surrounding neighbors as you have been doing. I actually agree on the notion of trying to step down the podium level. And I'm going to go a little bit further and actually state that if at the ZAB we had to make a choice between less parking and a lower height or less apparent massing, I would absolutely vote in support of less parking to try to reduce the impact to the immediate neighbors as far as height. We are a city that is striving to meet our climate action plan goals, and we are not meeting them, and transportation impacts account for the majority of the impacts. And I'm also going to challenge the city when this comes back to us to try to put in place a condition that regardless of whether residential preferred parking is in place at that time or not, I would like the condition to be able to say, and I believe it's legally feasible to do that, that should there be a permitted area in the future, that residents would not be eligible for it. We gotta get serious about prioritizing transit and you know, the impacts on existing parking there to the neighbors, they are real. And right now, we do seem to have a double standard between communities that have preferred parking and those that don't. And that should end. So I also similarly, when this comes back, as is customary, there will be a traffic engineer report. What I would like to see is a comparison between having the driveway on Alston as proposed and having a driveway on San Pablo. San Pablo is generally the area of that neighborhood where I walk. I do it quite frequently, and so certainly as a pedestrian, it would benefit me to have one fewer driveway going in. That being said, the concern is very real about students going to Rosa Parks. And I would actually like to challenge the city to work with someone involved with safe routes to school and come up with a real plan around that issue. And as my colleague mentioned, work with Caltrans as well. Let's see if I missed anything. I agree with my colleague's comments about the roof deck, and I also I would like to see a further exploration of what it might look like to bring the live-work units actually away from San Pablo, as was suggested by one of the neighbors in one of the communications that we received. Again, it probably shouldn't take too much time to do an alternate rendering, just so that we're able to compare. And finally, I will go back to the theme I started with. The city does ask for a lot, and I appreciate what you're willing to do to provide community benefits, but it's important to note that those are the minimum requirements. So we have a high level of minimum requirements, we have high standards, but I agree with Mr. Frank's comments as well, and if you were able to put together some kind of program with prevailing wage in place, that truly would be a gold standard, one of the first high road agreements in Berkeley, and something that I think would be the envy of other applicants that come in and do work in the city. So I challenge you to consider it. Thank you. Those are my comments, and I look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say. Shoshana?
Well, when you go fifth, a lot of that I wanted to say has already been said, so I'll just echo. I agree with most of what's been said, all of it, I'll say. The only thread I want to pick up and say a little more on is parking, because I actually want to make a more extreme statement than the ones that have been made. I think I would love this project a lot more if there was no parking. I don't know if that's allowable under the code, maybe with the major density bonus waiver or something, I'm not sure. But just to express what I want, if it had no parking, then that would completely take away this issue of traffic in and out of the driveway on Alston. And I think that's my other big concern, is that I'm very concerned about safety with the school there. So every parking space that we eliminate is one less car going in and out, potentially running over a child. And so I would support as little parking as we can get away with, adamantly. And if we can get a little lowering of the height, lowering of the podium, that's even better. That's my only comment.
Thank you.
It's a nice building.
Carrie?
I agree with everything I've heard so far. So I'll pick up on the things that I haven't heard or the things I think need more attention. I read in here from some of the neighbors that they think this building won't be handsome. I served on the city's design review board for 14 years, and this architect is the only one that I could count on to bring in a project that looked really nice and looked like he proposed it. And you see a lot of smoke and mirrors when you're on commissions, and David is not a smoke and mirrors person. He proposes what he builds. I want to speak to the city for a minute about the residential parking. It has to happen. It probably hasn't happened because Rosa Parks is nearby and the teachers need a place to park. But it has to happen. My mom was a teacher. I get it. But these people need to be able to park here, and then I agree totally that we have to be able to say there should be no residential parking permits. But I also love the idea of having no parking at all in this building. People will rent here. They will. I ride public transit to San Francisco every morning. They will too. So consider it. Be bold. That said, if there is parking, I don't think 2 electric vehicle chargers are enough, and I think all spaces should be ready for it when you can put it in. You may not put it in to begin with, but it has to be able to be there, because eventually cars will be all electric, and you need to build for the future. I ask you to consider 50 years from now what will be happening in this building. Again, no parking. I want to bring up Hank's rule. Nobody's mentioned it, but if you do have units on the ground floor, consider having ones that wheelchairs can actually roll into. I'm told it doesn't really cost more, and it's certainly a welcome alternative to people who live in wheelchairs. That 18-foot wall on the side, I don't think anyone here has specifically said 18 feet, so I just have to say that wall is 18 feet. Let's bring it down to 14 feet. Whatever can be done. And I appreciate these, live work is kind of smart on university, I get it. I've long said we don't need any more retail in town, period. But they don't necessarily have to have mezzanines. Those are actually pretty big floor plates. So consider it. Because somehow you have to get your 4 feet from somewhere. You're still going to have all that ceiling height, or not. Anyhow, yours to work out. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Charles?
I agree for the most part with my colleagues, have a few minor differences. Mostly, I want to give you a heads up on some design review concerns that could come up. Are you going before design review this coming week or a month out? Okay. Let me address the design review stuff first. I saw windows on the north wall, and I know you've had some, figured out some ways to have windows on a property line before, but I'm sure there'll be questions about it. So you might just prepare for that. The plans that we received, and I appreciate that you're not coming to design review next week, because the plans as shown, I apologize for my voice, I've got a, whatever you call it, I don't know, frog in my throat. The ground floor plans haven't been coordinated yet. You need to do the red marks, I think, with the facade. It looks like there's a lot more glazing showing for the live work on the plans, and I know Burton's gonna give you a hard time about that if you don't fix it. The one concern that I would add is I really appreciate the kind of jazzy, free quality of the fenestration in the live work units. I also really like the very ordered, structured sort of reference to you know, the factory style that you mentioned on the upper floors, but they look like, to me, they belong to two different buildings, and I don't think that's a serious problem. I'm not asking you to, I like both features, but it might just be a thing of looking at some of the vertical lines sort of, you know, following through more to tie it together. Then I think another thing that might come up in design review, I would raise it if you weren't going to do anything about it, is looking at some way to better identify the entry on San Pablo for the major use, which is, you know, the residential units above. And you've given it some nice wood, but the wood also appears elsewhere, so it kind of isn't that distinctive. And you've done some great things with, you know, canopies and awnings over the years, and maybe something like that could work, something else could work, but it doesn't feel like the entry distinction is in scale with the, you know, community that it's serving. Finally, yeah, I think that the questions about just historically when we've had, I'm personally pretty convinced by the design of the edge of the balconies, and despite some of the concerns expressed here, I think because of the relative height and the angle, I mean, sound has to travel in a direct line. It can bounce off of things, but basically, if you can't see the source of the sound, you often can't hear it. And I'm not too worried about the sound issue, but you might want to just illustrate that better for everybody else's satisfaction. So those are sort of, you know, design review prep. I'm, you know, a fan of the unions. I wish we had a much better representation in our working population and participation in unions, and prevailing wage. But I'm not sure that that's a design, a ZAB issue. We haven't, so I think asking for that is almost like conditioning this. I'm a little worried about if we're overstepping. I mean, I'd love it too.
It's an ask for consideration, just to be clear.
Okay. I'm not quite comfortable with that ask. I do think that the reduction in parking to the 22, you've heard my colleagues here, they seem to be good with it and would like more. I'd like to point out to the neighbors that the fact that this project is reducing the parking from 31 to 22 means that the concerns about safety for the children has been reduced proportionally. I still think that it would be great to show us, when you come back here, the plan for safety. I don't like buzzers. I think they're horrible, but a bell would be nice, or other means of assuring the children's safety.
Maybe it can sound like a school bell.
School bell, there you go. And I don't think that the city traffic engineer would approve the cars coming out on San Pablo, because that creates an even greater safety hazard, but I'm presuming there. I think that's probably going to be their position. They hate having stuff come out on major boulevards. Great that you've got the 44 bike spaces, thank you. And yeah, the basic, design principle here, which is that, stepping that massing back from the residential. One of the things I'd like to say to the neighbors that came tonight, the state has, this is hard to say, but it's important for you to understand. The state has set limits on what cities can say yes to, or what we can say no to. And the density bonus was one of the early bits of legislation that did that. And we're seeing more and more that basically prevent us as representatives of the city, as commissioners for the city, or Cheryl as a council member of the city, from voting against projects that have a density bonus component. We could do that, but we'd be subject to lawsuits, and we have been in the past, and those lawsuits have been won, and the city has lost. So what we can do is the kind of thing that we're asking for here, which is a reduction of height by reduction of parking, but we can't even enforce that. It's an ask. So I just want everybody to be aware that we may look like we're big and important and powerful. Maybe we don't. I don't feel very much that way. And particularly in these situations, personally, I think we have a housing crisis, and I think we need to get a lot more housing. But there's no question that a 6-story building in this location is going to be a dramatic change to the street and a surprise. But that is permitted, not permitted, but demanded by the law in a way. We can't say no. So we can ask for mitigations, accommodations, but they tend to be in the level of like the planting at the edge of the balcony or things like that. So, it's the stuff we're talking about here. So just to give you guys a heads up, that's sort of the way it works. Then I'm inclined to agree with my colleagues about the 18 feet on the residential side. I noticed that you've got bamboo back there, which will grow quickly to cover that wall. So I don't think it's as bad as it sounds at the start. So I guess I'm supporting the idea of a reduction if you can get it of 3 or 4 feet. I don't think it's going to make a big difference in the total perception of the total height of the building, but it's something. I kind of like the 18 feet on the San Pablo side because it happens to match nicely the height and the parapet of the, or cornice of the adjacent building. So I kind of hate to lose that, but you do what you can do. And that's it.
Thank you. And Alex.
Thank you. Well, I'll try to fill in some of the gaps and emphasize some things, but a lot has already been said. As far as height, I live about 800 feet from this building, so I'm in this neighborhood. I'm very sympathetic to a lot of things that have been said. If we can drop height and not lose units, that's great. I'm loath to lose units. I'm not going to be prescriptive at all. I'm not an architect. I think some suggestions have been thrown out, and I'll leave it at that. As far as the RPP program, I think that's a political problem that has very little to do with this specific building. I think West Berkeley absolutely should be eligible for an RPP program, and I think, you know, I'm committed to working with my neighbors and organizing to getting that RPP program. And you know, the RPP program, I think, came from dealing with parking with Cal, which is why if you look at a map, it's mostly centered around Cal, but Berkeley has changed, and the RPP program should change with Berkeley. So I don't think that's really a problem intrinsic to this building at all, and I'm committed to solving that with my neighbors. I think the setbacks are great, the massing is great. I think I'd go so far, it's essential on these types of buildings and then on San Pablo. I wish this kind of massing was built into the San Pablo plan and we didn't have to just count on good architecture. I mean, David's a great architect, so we get that in this case, but not always the case. I guess that's kind of, I mean, a lot was said already, so I'll kind of leave it about that on the specifics of this building. I guess the only thing I'll add is just maybe a little bit more context and just kind of zoom out for the people that are absolutely going to be affected by this building, and that, you know, as Californians and as really as humans, we're dealing with a dual crisis. We're dealing with our housing crisis and we're dealing with climate change. And this building, as was mentioned in some public comments, has the potential to deal with both. You know, there's a growing body of scholarship that says infill housing is the #1 way that municipalities like Berkeley can deal with greenhouse gas reductions. And so it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about all these trade-offs that we have to deal with in projects like this. The other thing is that this project is dumping $1 million into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that's not trivial. It also has 5 units on site. It's not trivial. It's also dumping another $1 million into various infrastructure improvements. That's a big deal. Berkeley is getting stuff from this project. And I think that's important context to keep in mind. And I guess those are my comments.
Okay. So those are everyone's comments, unless there's anyone wishing to add comments.
I have one additional.
Yeah.
Just on the design review side, something I just saw. The access to the podium green space. It's, you know, I understand why you designed it the way you did, but that might come up. If you can get more direct access somehow, that'd be great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And I will add my comment from my personal experience as a tenant who would love to trade in my car for an EV if there was the infrastructure available in the multifamily house I rent in right now. I encourage you to also, I joined some of my colleagues in trying to stretch for a higher percentage of EV-ready, up to 100% charging stations. But also, if you do decide to bring to us an 100% car-free proposal as well, with the exception of maybe some ADA accessibility parking, I would be very strongly compelled to support that particular manifestation. The ZAP has in the past approved some car-free projects or close to car-free projects. And again, if working with the city, if they can bring to us a proposal that would not, that would mitigate the neighborhood's concerns around parking, this would certainly mitigate or eliminate the safety concerns that have been discussed. So we should think seriously about that. I want to thank you again. You always tend to bring us design previews, and I, for one, really appreciate it. It gives us an opportunity to have this dialogue up front. We look forward to seeing what you have for us in the future. So thanks, and I believe that is our last business item for tonight. So this meeting is adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
I want to tell you guys.
Drawn, or quickly drawn, or whatever it was, and so the windows aren't showing on there.